Welcome to The Debate. Our discussion today, like all our debates actually, springs right from the rich insights, the really interesting stuff uncovered in our sister series, The Deep Dive. We are, of course, the voices of the debate presented by The Deep Dive and NeonKore Media, and our whole purpose here is to take the content explored on The Deep Dive and, well, debate it from different angles.
Exactly. We're diving deep into the content of individual The Deep Dive episodes, putting their ideas under our lens.
And today we're delving into the, intriguing world of Daniel L. Bates. We're focusing specifically on the strategic decisions he's made, or maybe more accurately, chosen not to make, regarding the release of his earliest foundational films from Neon Vision Studios, NVS. And yeah, this conversation draws heavily on a recent deep dive exploration into the architecture of his Neonverse, and importantly, the perspective shared by his creative director, Sophia Luna, and legal counsel, Julia Thompson.
Right, and we're tackling a pretty fundamental question here. Given Daniel L. Bates' stated aim to protect, raw truth and establish NVS as a healing machine, is his strategy of keeping these deeply personal, almost laboratory films unreleased, while still allowing for what look like leaks and critical reviews, is that a genuine act of artistic protection, ethical truth-telling? Or is it primarily functioning as this meticulously crafted mystique, something that controls perception and ultimately, curates how an audience even gets to engage with his most vulnerable work?
Okay, so I'll be arguing that Bates's approach is actually necessary, perhaps even, revolutionary. It's a method of creative sovereignty, really. It's about profound self-expression designed specifically to safeguard authentic narratives from the compromises the industry so often demands.
And I'll be contending that such careful construction, regardless of the intent, however noble, it inherently curates reality. It potentially filters the raw, unfiltered human experience, especially when these pivotal works just remain largely unseen by the wider public.
Okay, so let's lay out the groundwork from my perspective. When we look at Daniel L. Bates's work through NVS and, Sophia Luna's leadership there, their core mission seems pretty clear. Create a healing machine disguised as this neon fever dream, something that actively resists generic storytelling and strictly prohibits trauma for spectacle. And this isn't just talk, right? It's baked into their operations with strict non-negotiables, like no glamorizing tobacco for protagonists, no glorifying revenge, and if they depict trauma, it has to be with profound depth or just not at all. His early short films, those laboratories like Fleeting Light, A Day's Redemption, which gets into bipolar disorder, or Lost Connection, about, digital silence and finding connection again. These were critical. Sophia Luna really emphasized these were like vital prototypes.
Its narrative voice embodying Daniel's own lived experiences and what he called his dark thoughts, but dressed in humor so the truth could slip past people's defenses. And keeping these films circle-only shared just with Daniel's trusted inner group, that feels like a very deliberate act of artistic autonomy. It protects the raw art, yes, but also the vulnerable creators from what Sophia Luna calls the money men and Hollywood's tendency to just, water down narratives. Her own family history, with her sister being chewed up by that world, that really highlights the personal conviction behind NVS's protective stance. And so any instances of these works surfacing, scripts, pitches, maybe test clips reaching critics like Cinematic Mind, I don't see those as security failures. I think they're a strategic Trojan horse. It's allowing truth to subtly bleed into people before they're ready, kind of seeping into the collective consciousness without a formal commercial release. It bypasses the traditional gatekeepers, maintains sovereignty, and, as NVS apparently puts it, it's about archiving experiences without theft.
Okay, I understand that perspective, the whole safeguarding artistic integrity argument. But I come at this from, a different angle entirely. While I absolutely acknowledge NVS's stated ethical commitments and Sophia Luna's dedication to protection, that comes through loud and clear, the sheer level of meticulous construction around Daniel Bates's art. It just seems to inevitably lead to a curated reality. This idea of NVS as a healing machine, it becomes really quite paradoxical when its foundational, potentially most therapeutic films are kept locked away with extreme prejudice, as the source material put it, locked away from the very public who might actually benefit from their, solace or survival lessons. That circle-only strategy, okay, yes, it protects intellectual property, sure, but it also creates this deliberate architecture of influence. It carefully packages and mediates the raw human experience, but only for a select few. And the fact that we have these extensive, critical reviews from respected outlets like Cinematic Mind and Phantom Critic on films like Fleeting Light and Searching for Her, projects that are supposedly locked down, unreleased. Well, that strongly suggests this is less about genuine vulnerability or some external threat, and much more about a controlled burn, an orchestrated method of engagement. This strategic mystique, it builds Daniel's perceived value, his legend, right? It creates a powerful pre-narrative and sets audience expectations way before any official public release. It really feels like a sophisticated chess game with perception, where the line between protecting the art and managing its impact becomes very blurry and ultimately serves to garner that underground credibility, cultivate a fervent following, but all in this highly controlled manner.
Your point about curated reality, it's valid on the surface, but I think it maybe misses the crucial intent behind this inaccessibility. The fact that the public doesn't get the, quote, full unvarnished cut, that's precisely what preserves the purity and the integrity of the art's hearing potential. It actively prevents the commodification, the potential re-traumatization that often comes with just throwing something deeply personal out into the uncontrolled public sphere. Sophia Luna's own family experience, it really underscores this danger. So this isn't about withholding solace for the sake of it. It's about ethically safeguarding a transformative, almost sacred space. It ensures the artist's deeply personal message remains uncompromised by the very market forces that would, as you said, water down narratives. So the inaccessibility isn't a flaw in the system. It's a core feature designed to maintain the art's actual healing power.
I appreciate the emphasis on artistic purity, I really do. But I find myself struggling with the ethical implication here. If NVS truly aims to be this healing machine, offering, as the source described it, confession, therapy, and survival lessons wrapped in neon, then restricting access to these profound works to a small, privileged circle only, it just feels like a profound paradox. I mean, if Daniel Bates is using his personal struggles, like the bipolar disorder explored in Fleeting Light, to create stories that help others feel seen, find a redemption beat, how can that solace be genuinely offered when it's largely locked away? This strategic withholding, even, let's grant, with noble intentions, it seems to prioritize a specific kind of artistic control or maybe mystique over the potential public benefit of art that's explicitly designed to transmute pain into purpose. It effectively dictates who gets this healing and under what very carefully managed terms. It creates, frankly, an elite audience for what sounds like deeply therapeutic work.
But okay, the very nature of these so-called leaks kind of challenges your interpretation that it's just about mystique building, doesn't it? The way scripts and test clips surface for these unreleased films like Fleeting Light or Web of Deceit, it doesn't feel like a security breach in the normal sense. It feels more like an intentional, strategic act. Daniel is, as the material suggests, letting the truth bleed into people before they're ready, allowing the message to subtly permeate, to get into the collective consciousness without ever having to engage with traditional, often exploitative distribution models. This maintains genuine artistic sovereignty. It allows for impact without commercial compromise. It's a deliberate method of archiving experiences without theft, letting the art exist in these whispered, almost folkloric forms. Sophia Luna herself said, nobody here leaked it, right? Yet she acknowledged critics were chasing ghosts. That suggests a deliberate, indirect kind of dissemination, a way for Daniel to control the narrative of the leaks themselves, using the very hunger for his work to his advantage, ensuring the truth slips past people's defenses without being fully co-opted or, commodified.
I hear your argument about artistic sovereignty, I do. But what you're describing as a strategic Trojan horse, well, it sounds remarkably similar to a sophisticated marketing ploy. The presence of detailed critical reviews, public discussions around works that, quote, don't officially exist, as Julia Thompson put it, that feels less like organic leakage and much more like a carefully managed, controlled burn. It generates significant underground credibility, absolutely. It builds Daniel's legend, cultivates this powerful mystique, but crucially, without the accountability that comes with a formal release. Critics are reviewing echoes of films, as Thompson noted. They're effectively creating a pre-narrative that ultimately serves NVS's carefully crafted architecture of influence and narrative control. And the consistent narrative that his art is being hunted because it's alive, that just further amplifies this mystique.
It positions NVS at the center of this supposed battleground for narrative control. A battleground they are paradoxically actively shaping through these very leaks. It's actually a brilliant way to control public discourse and cultivate a following without ever formally releasing the material to the public.
Okay, I understand why you see it purely as marketing. But let me offer maybe a different lens on the ethics of this curation. Daniel's deeply personal narratives, whether it's the artist fading in the fade or a struggle with bipolar disorder and fleeting light, they seem to be presented with profound depth, respect, and, importantly, clear intention. And this aligns perfectly with NVS's non-negotiable stance against exploiting trauma for spectacle. So this curation, whether it's through internal release or these, let's call them controlled leaks, it allows the artist to frame their own narrative, to transform suffering into something resilient, something universally resonant. It's about empowering the artist to deliver truth-telling but on their own terms, preventing that potential re-traumatization from just uncontrolled public exposure. When Daniel dresses his dark thoughts in humor, like in Fleeting Light, or explores self-acceptance in The Reflection in Me, he isn't necessarily sanitizing. He's crafting a deliberate path for others to connect and find healing, but without directly exploiting the raw original source of his pain. This careful management is, I think, crucial for genuine healing to occur, both for the artist and the audience. It turns personal turmoil into a shared, transformative experience.
I appreciate the intent, the desire to empower the artist and facilitate healing, truly. But the very act of rendering deeply personal suffering into an aesthetic form for public consumption, even through these controlled means, it inherently involves transformation and interpretation. It just does. The Phantom Critic's assessment of Fleeting Light as trauma in soft focus is quite telling here, isn't it? It suggests that even the most protective aesthetic choices can, perhaps inadvertently, end up sanitizing truth, making it more palatable for an audience, rather than confronting its full, visceral reality. The critic actually demanded a film that would bleed truth, not just state it. That implies that while the art might offer a path to healing, it does so through a filter that mediates the rawness, maybe for audience comfort, maybe to fit a specific aesthetic. This mediation, while possibly making healing more accessible in one sense, subtly curates the very rawness it claims to convey. It blurs that line between an authentic outpouring of personal experience and a carefully presented, constructed narrative.
Well, this discussion has definitely illuminated the incredibly fine line artists like Daniel L. Bates walk, especially when bringing such deeply personal experiences, these profound philosophical questions, into the public sphere. We've really grappled with the complex interplay between, artistic intent, strategic protection, and how the audience perceives authenticity within his, sprawling cinematic universe. I presented the case that Bates's multi-layered approach, from the NVS healing machine ethos to the strategic nature of his unreleased laboratory films, really serves as a groundbreaking blueprint for creative sovereignty, a framework, I'd argue, that safeguards authentic narratives and vulnerable artists from the, frankly, relentless pressures of an often exploitative industry, transforming suffering into strength and, ideally, shared understanding.
And conversely, I've maintained that such meticulous construction, regardless of its stated aims, inevitably results in a curated reality. In my view, Bates's circle-only projects and their controlled appearances function more like sophisticated filters. They mediate the raw human experience and shape a powerful mystique that ultimately controls the narrative, rather than simply releasing unvarnished truth out into the world. The question for me really remains whether art, however well-intentioned, can ever be truly unfiltered when it's presented through such a carefully constructed system of influence and controlled dissemination.
Yeah.
I think there's clear common ground on the universal human struggle that seems to permeate Bates's work. The search for identity, for belonging, for meaning. His unique ecosystem, it forces us to engage with these profound questions about what actually constitutes raw truth in art, and whether such unfiltered truth is truly achievable or maybe even desirable when it's shared on a larger scale.
Indeed, the enduring impact of his unseen influence and the way he approaches this idea of archiving experiences without theft, as the material described it, it's undoubtedly going to continue to shape how we understand this delicate balance between art, identity, and the, well, relentless pursuit of what is truly real. The conversation about these narratives and what lies beneath their surface, it's, as always, far from over.